So welcome to the show. How's it going? You're the first one from your guys' ticket that I'm going to be talking to. Um, we're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff. If you would like to introduce yourself to the people listening or watching, that would be awesome.
Yeah, I am Nate Ostdiek. I am the Mavericks United vice presidential candidate, and thanks for having me, Zach. It's really cool to be here and to be able to just record a long conversation to really get my thoughts out there.
Yeah. So I'm going to be following the same format for all the different guests on the ticket, and I talked with you about this before. So first, I want to go into your background and some of the stuff that led you up to this point. So, what was it like for you growing up, like elementary school, middle school?
Oh, okay. So I'll just start off with my family. So,
Yeah.
my family, I've lived in Omaha my whole life. Born here. My family's all from Nebraska. Dad's from Gretna. Mom's actually from Omaha, and I was uh, I was born in the year 2002 to go way back, and then we could skip ahead a little while. And I went to a Catholic school for a while. Then I went to public school. I like that a bit more. It was a bit less high strung. Got yelled at a lot less there. I was able to make some more friends. But things really started to pick up when I have two younger brothers. That's the other really influential thing.
Hmm.
They're like some of my best friends. Especially my younger brother Aaron. He's gonna be starting here at UNO next year. Him and I are just always chilling out. We were hanging out. I mean, just even last night, we were hanging out till I don't know, 3 a.m. He was watching The Walking Dead. I was playing a video game. It was a chill vibe, and getting to know him, and everything's just been really really fun. But
Hmm.
yeah, I went to Swanson Elementary School. For people who might know, it's here in Omaha. It's in West Side School District. Um, there things were kind of weird, to be honest. I mean, so at Catholic school, I got bullied a ton, and I didn't get it. I was like, it was a mixture of just everything got to me, and I was like, I don't get it. But then I had Stockholm syndrome, simultaneously. I accidentally almost kissed the mic, but because I thought I loved it there. I was like, oh, I'm having such a great time here. So when first grade passed, second grade came around, my family, we moved, and we're starting this new school here. I don't have to wear a uniform, and so I'm kind of freaking out because I don't know, my mom's like, Nate, you need to wear clothes that match, and I'm like, no,
Hmm.
I think these do match, and it's you know like something hideous that doesn't match at all. And I go in and I'm just really grumpy because I'm like, I want to be back at where I thought I was comfortable. And it took probably about a full year to realize that, oh, wait, no, I was actually having way more fun here because just people were nicer. I was able to get into all these sports teams. I was pretty horrible at just about every sport I played, but I had a fun time. That's what counted. Um, you, you know, but middle school is where things actually started to get kind of more fun, where Nate, as I know myself today, started to kind of emerge. Because I got involved with theater, which was probably the single most impactful extracurricular on and activity on my entire life. Um, there's a couple of shows there. Um, they were ran fairly interestingly, um, because in these shows they would all these kids would audition, and they never said no to anybody who auditioned. But you can then imagine a musical where you have a 40 or 60 person cast. And it's they're just everyone's just piling onto the stage, and it's just completely full. There was a lot of kind of chaos from that, but it was it was kind of trying to get the fish to notice that there's water. There's a bit of that situation because it was the only really thing I knew, as far as theatrical productions and doing things as a team went. Because it was just like, I know that this is going to be a chaotic time, and that's just part of it. I also met just my closest group of friends that like started to form in middle school. We all kind of coalesced around the game Super Smash Brothers Melee. Which, like, for those of you who don't know, there's like Smash Bros, which is all the Nintendo games. Melee is the one that came out back in like 2001 or 2003, something like that, and it has a I mean, it's the best one. It has just a very competitive scene. It wasn't meant to be a competitive video game, but because development got rushed and everything, it was full of things which inadvertently ended up being bugs, which made it really fun to play at like a super try hard level, like go home after school, like just practice for like hours sort of perspective. So just within our friend group, we started to get really competitive with each other. And there was like, we would have like tournaments and stuff, just like with our friend group, which grew a bit more and more over time. And like, people started hearing about it and like, oh, I want to come like do this thing. And so eventually we had this group chat with like 20 people, like in middle school. And it was like, oh yeah, we're all playing this game and we're having a big bracket and doing all this. But then things started to take the turn for the weird. So high school comes along, and late in middle school, we start a thing called Melee rankings. So every single person in the group was ranked from, for like, number 1, you're the best at Melee, to the worst. And then that began to get correlated with basically effective like political power within the group, and it became a actual like hierarchy where it was like whenever we would all hang out, if it's like, who gets the first slice of pizza, who gets the last slice of pizza, who gets the best seating, it became all very like structured and attuned onto that, to the point where it started to become like kind of toxic, because there was a 2-tiered system within this. There was what called there were the bummies and the regular people. The regular people was a cabal of, I don't know, probably it was like a threshold that you had to reach to be good enough to be considered not a bummy. And it was just a cabal of, the most influential, best people at Melee in our friend group. And it was like really weird because, that all started to happen. And the resentment started fomenting among the bummy ranks, which I was among, because I wasn't that good. I think I was at this time maybe ranked like, I don't know, like 9th or something. It's pretty irrelevant what it was. I played Princess Peach at this time. Very fun. I've since switched to Samus, and like Samus, a lot more fun. You can do a lot of technical, really weird stuff with it. People hate playing against it. People say I play lame. I think I just play the win. And but there's a bummy revolution. So we all kind of got riled up and we're like, hey, we're bringing an end to this. And that was my start in revolutionary politics. We overthrew the not bummies.
How old were you? Around like 13, 14?
I was 14 at the time.
Young start.
Yeah. And there, there was pushback from the halves. They're like, hey, this is all a joke. This is like not fair. Like, they're like, what are you doing? Like all this. And it's like, oh, if this is all a joke, then why does it even matter? I mean, it was fun. It was very much fun organizing, the people to be like, okay, like next tournament's boycotted unless like there are changes made. So that was like just a really fun start. Parallel to this sort of friend group, which then this just continued through high school. It ebbed and flowed with how much we actually like played and cared about Melee, but always was kind of a very foundational pillar where it was like, oh yeah, that game, which is relatively obscure. It's not super obscure. A lot of people know it, but like for like a high school, it's like that was our thing. Parallel to this, there's theater, which starting in high school, I really actually got what theater could be, the camaraderie of it, just having a director who didn't insist on shoving 80 kids on a stage helped. And so I just auditioned and for shows throughout my my freshman year. And the first show that came around, it was Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare. And I'd never had a speaking part.
Bro, we'll have to do this every now and then. This will be a prevailing theme in this room.
Hello.
They're on.
Okay. By William Shakespeare. I'd never really I was very nervous about auditioning. I was like even torn between doing it or not because I'd never read Shakespeare before. I was like looking at the auditioning script. I was like, this is really weird and like kind of squiggly looking. Like the language is all off. And then we go into the audition room. I'm reading a piece for this dude, Malvolio, who's like, I don't really know. It's just, I don't know the story. I'm just like, he's like some servant dude or whatever. And then they go in and they're like, okay, so this is Shakespeare. Now, can you try to do it in a Southern accent? And I'm like, excuse me? And I give it a go. And I'm like a little freshman because like I'm like a little freshman, like yay high. Like really, and I'm like, okay. Went really well. Come to know it. I ended up like getting that role. And that was like really, after there's callbacks and all this other stuff, which ends up happening. And I'm like, whoa. I'm like the only like freshman in this cast. There's a couple others. But I was like, whoa. And then I was looking at the script. I'm like, this is a big role. I'm like, how do I like get through all this? Cause like we're doing our first table read and I'm flipping through the script and, Malvolio is the villain in the show. He's a comedic villain. He's mostly harmless. He just takes himself way too seriously. That's kind of his main thing. And then the jester plays tricks on him throughout the whole thing. Really trying to get him to realize that he's taking himself way too seriously, and like he ends up getting disgraced and everything. But it's all in good fun. It was really cool. But we're going through this script, and I come to a thing, and I have like a 3-page monologue, and I'm like, oh crap, how do I have to memorize this? I have to like learn this like word for word, like this whole thing, and that was a struggle bus just through that whole experience. But just learning it, grinding it out, because what it was, the scene was, it was a monologue where Lady Olivia, who's like he works for, Malvolio has long sought after Lady Olivia's like hand. That's his whole thing. He's both very power hungry and he's like secretly in love with her. She's like a rich, because we made it take place in like I don't know, like the South and like the 1800s. So everyone was wearing like big dresses and stuff, and he's like all power hungry and stuff, but the jester named Festi really is messing with him. So Festi writes a letter pretending from Lady Olivia to him saying that, hey, Malvolio, I love you, but the only way that I will like profess my love is if you wear yellow tights and like we're basically not like lingerie, but you get cross gartered, which is like, think of like almost like a fishnet. Like, and you do that and then you profess your love to me and then like do that. So then he does that whole big scene. But when he finds that letter, he's monologuing. And I was getting really kind of nervous about it because it was getting closer and closer to show night, and I was like only piecing it together like this big scene. And the other people on the crew and stuff, they've been telling me that like, oh yeah, traditionally we write like just really funny things on like any prop letter. Like it's not actually the letter, it'll be like things actually on there to try to make you like mess up, or it's like I don't think I could say any of the things that were supposed to be on it, but you, let your imaginations come up with some of the raunchiest things you can imagine. That's usually what's on there, and it's like, okay, like that's funny. But come the night before the show opens, I finally got the monologue down, and then I go and I get the prop letter and I start monologuing it, and I look at the text, and the entire letter is written word for word from my monologue on there. And I just like hardcore froze, and I was like, I have absolutely no idea what to do right now because I just memorized everything, and there's like interjections throughout this whole thing. But then here on this monologue, there is the whole script, and like brain just broke, and that was just like kind of a very formational moment where I was like, oh crap, I gotta like work at this. I gotta like, be able to roll with the punches and get out of a very static mindset, because that's I think something that my entire life I've been striving to do is to get out of a static mindset and to get into a dynamic present moment sort of deal where I'm like, okay, I am able to roll with the punches and not just come in with like a game plan or whatever and like my expectations and be able to like let those down and just roll with the moment. And that was just kind of a big challenge there. But then throughout high school, just got into theater leadership, was in more so like helping plan just like events and things like that, did more shows, acted more. Then in my junior year I decided to get into stage crew because I was like, I haven't really done like backstage stuff, and I thought I wasn't gonna like it, but turns out it was way cooler. Like just like building a set and being like, okay, I have to be like handy right now and crafty. It was, a whole new demand. I was a complete, I mean, I still am a complete just nerd, like dweeb. Like I don't, putting things together, that's not quite my, like strong suit. I'm not like, with that. And so I'm like, okay, I have to like right now learn how to use a drill and like jerry rig this thing to like we had a smoke machine in one of our shows, and it was like I need to like rig up tubing so the smoke comes out at all these different areas, or like fog, and like I'm like, okay, yeah, I can do that. Give me some duct tape, and like just getting that attitude was really 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 fun. Very rewarding experience. But then it's the other, so that was like that taught me, I'm like, okay, I can be like, there are other sides of things. Like it's not just about being like out there. It can also be about like working in the back and like, and this is really cliche, but like the fruit of just like a hard day's work almost. There was kind of that attitude of it because it's like I know that there's not going to be like a lot of credit. There's not really going to be, like that sort of applause, which like is, I mean, you have to at least at some level be trying to seek it to do theater. Like, why else? What else would like get you on a stage? It's kind of a weird thing to do. I mean, it's a really fun thing to do, but from a certain point of view. And I was like, oh, this is something that is very very fun. Like building this set, just working with other people, like coordinating a crew to be like, oh hey, because now it's like I'm a junior and there's all these freshmen running around, and I'm like, okay, you guys like gotta fall in line. But part of the lesson from that was, how do you get people to listen to what you're saying? How do you get people to, flashback to Malvolio, take you seriously? How do you get people to like, how do you be a leader? With that sort of question, like those questions started to come up, and I saw like throughout earlier, there'd be all these instances where people would be like stage managing and doing things like that within this theater world. And they would try to clamp down really hard and like micromanage, where it would be like, okay, listen to this, I'm in charge, and asserting that sort of authority. And I also knew, because I was one of the actors that they were trying to clamp down on, that I didn't always really work. So I'm like, there has to be kind of a more collaborative way to work on this. Like, how do I not make it like me versus these stupid actors? How do I make it like, okay, we're actually on the same team right now and we're working together? And so, some of that came from being like, okay, using the carrot and the stick, like, and knowing how to use that properly. And, the sorts of rewards where it's like, okay, because this is a rehearsal right now, if there's going to be a little bit of conversation, that can be all right, because giving that benefit of the doubt, knowing it's like, maybe this is leading to some jitters. If they're getting too loud, be like, hey, knock it off. Like that sort of perspective where it's like, how would I want to get, what would work for me? Like for creating a lasting culture and kind of an aura like around in that backstage space of, this is, kind of a, a sacred area. Like you got to be serious. You have to have your intentions set. You need to be zoned in. Being back here, you can't be goofing off. You can't be on your phone. And I think understanding that, me even trying to enforce that, very difficult, takes away from that, that sacred space. Like if I enforce my will and I make it about me, or, about me in the sense that like, I'm telling you right now, like, hey, do this. It's killing the vibe. It's not supposed to be about that. So just those sorts of experiences then started to inform the other really big formational moment in high school, which was senior year. There was a Westside. There's a government project. There's a model election. So student government, we do like not student government. It was like government class, like U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
They do a model election with the whole senior class, where it's like everybody can like run for president. Each section of class is a different state, and you can like run for president. You can be a staffer. You can run for Congress. You can run for Senate. There's all these things. Everybody's doing stuff. Every year it's a big spectacle. And going into it, I was like, oh, I'm gonna win this thing. Like, I'm gonna figure this out. Like, I've played strategy games my entire life. I've been playing board games. I get locked into this competitive mindset. I'm like, I'm gonna win. Like, this is sort of it. So just that first semester, it's all of these. And this is when Hakim and I, the presidential candidate, we went to high school together also. And we've been like friends like for a while, like prior to this, like sort of off and on. He played Melee with us every once in a while, or like we'd hang out every once in a while. We were both in choir together. But we weren't like particularly close. We used to be kind of rivals, because Gov is where our heads really started to butt against one another. Because in this government election, we were both running for president, and we were from the same state of Washington, which was a rather competitive section. And throughout this primary process, I thought to myself that, like, what does it mean to take this, like, seriously? What does it mean to actually be, like, genuine? And I think a big part of that is having a spontaneity and embracing, what currently in politics is working. So I looked at like the 2016 and 2020 presidential race, because now it's 2020, like the real life presidential elections coming up. And I said, what do I see in politics right now that I think is like working and appealing? I saw the populist campaigns of both Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders, which had gained massive amounts of momentum in the United States, appealing to people's intuition that they are being screwed over. By who and how is different, and there is, hey, okay, and there's a lot of definitely, I think a lot of hate behind a lot of those sorts of movements, but it can be. But I said, they're being real. That's like the most important thing. They are actually speaking. They don't care what people are necessarily going to think about them. It just is like, this is their honest opinion. They're speaking their truth. And that was the approach I took to it, where it was like, people would come out here, they would make these ads, they would do all these other things where it'd be very like, oh, like this is what a political ad's supposed to look like. And this is what I'm supposed to say because I'm a politician. This is what I say. This is how I behave. Like that sort of like behavior, that fakeness. Sometimes you call it Washington brain. That's like the thing where it's like you've been in power, or you think you're gonna win. And it's just that sort of thing where it's like you've lost the plot. And so it was coming in like a wrecking ball into this debate. Like at that first debate, everybody was being very. They would do a staged debate with all the candidates. Everybody was being very peaceful with like answering the questions as they would go around, real quiet, just staying in their positions. And I was like, I'm not doing that. The second it came to me, I gave my answer and like, this is why I'm right. And this person's wrong because that, and saying it. And because I think highlighting the contrast between, why are things actually different within this? I know this is all a whole model, like election, but this is something I think about real, politics too. I think that politicians fail to engage on the actual policy issues and saying why it's matter. Like they pretend like it's like, oh, this is something that's, not going to necessarily affect, them personally. So they lose a degree of seriousness about it in favor of like, oh, hey, I want to be like civil and have this decorum to like, these are my friends. Like I see them at lunch, even though we disagree on these policy issues. That I think ignores some elements of the responsibilities that come with being an elected official, where you are actually making decisions. It's not just about you and like the institution. It's also about the people that you're representing and the people that it can end up helping. And like I just infused that into the campaign. One by one, other candidates were dropping out like flies. I was, doing what I could to consolidate them because it's a Democratic primary. So like, if they pledge, it's all about like that delegate share, like getting them to pledge their delegates to you throughout the primary season.
How many individuals were running for the presidential slot in the beginning?
I think at the beginning there were 12.
Okay.
Maybe eight or nine. There's quite a few. At the very first poll that was conducted, I was at, I believe, 2%, which means that the people that said that they're going to vote for me was me and one of my staffers. And maybe one other person, which is not, and this is before the first debate, the person with the biggest slice of the pie had probably almost 40%. They were from Iowa, the state, which if you're familiar with they've changed it, but with the primary process, they were the first state to go. They were a very kind of well-liked, well-known, popular individual, a very nice person. And I was like, and they were very overconfident that they're going to win because I'd actually heard through the grapevine. I think I actually heard this from Hakim, as a matter of fact, because we were both like pulling on the smaller end of things. So we're like, let's try to help each other out right now. That they were saying it's like, why is Nate running? Why does he think he's going to win this? Why is he even running? Like, we got this in the bag. And that sort of smug overconfidence. And I was like, I just need to go in there and like blow that thing up. Cause like, no way you think you're getting away with this easily. You think this is going to be a simple popularity contest and you could just make funny videos and win? No way. So, it was a mixture of talking to, cause there were also students who were reporters. And I was like, I'm going to use this. I'm going to use I looked at, we had a rule book. It was like this thick of like things that we're allowed to do. We had to go to different teachers who were pretending to be like PACs. Like, so you could go to the Union or you could go to Walmart, you could go to Boeing, and you'd have to ask for money from them. And they would want promises in exchange. And like things that you would do, like, it's like, oh, it's just a donation, but it's really, like quid pro quo. And it really captured that sort of like essence of how politics in our country tend to work. It's pay to play. And, so just right off the gate on that, I was like, I'm taking no money from any sort of businesses or anything. I'm only taking from unions and average donors. That's like my thing. I'm only taking from small money donors and that, cause I'm like, I want to remain genuine. And then there's the game aspect of that too, because if people don't take the PAC thing seriously, it's like, I don't want to be launching just like personal attacks on the individual. I want to ground it in policy. Because I think that at the end of the day is what ultimately matters, is what are you actually standing for and what are you actually going to like go to the mat for? And so I see that some of these other Democratic politicians had taken money from Boeing. They'd taken money from ExxonMobil. And so I said, okay, I'm going to go on tour. So there was you could do a rally. So Westside had modular scheduling. So the schedule, it's like all staggered. You have different things every single day. Throughout the day, there are 14, but really 10, like they're called mods or like periods throughout the day. They're about 40 minutes each. And you have large portions of open mods where it's just like, this time's just like yours. You can study or do whatever. So doing every single one of those open mods, I would schedule a rally in another state that I had the opportunity to do. And I would go in there. I'd be wearing a big old cowboy hat because that became the way I was going to distinguish myself. I was like, I'm going to wear a funny hat. And I was like, I found this cowboy hat and I'm like, this is what I'm wearing. This is my thing. I'm like, okay, this is kind of Teddy Roosevelt-esque. That's where I was going for. And I went in there and I put on a slideshow, highlighting basically screenshots of the donations to each of the different candidates and going through. I'm saying, hey, I'm the only person you can trust to get this done because I haven't taken money from these things. I'm fighting for the right issues. We're going to, get single payer healthcare. We're going to do it. We have way too much wealth inequality. We have way too many wars going on. Like the US is blowing so many people up and that is evil. Like, and it's just something that's not, this is something I'm really passionate about. It's just not talked about. Like the fact that thankfully, Afghanistan pulling out of there was botched, but thankfully we're out of there. Because I even remember there were quotes from like people on the ground there. They would like reports would ask them, it's like, hey, how much control do you have over this area? It would be like maybe a base out in some like remote village, and their answers would be as far as the machine guns reach. And it's like, buddy, you're the imperialist bad guy. Like, I mean, not him specifically, because it's a whole big system, but like there is that aspect of this is like we lost the US has had problems throughout its entire history, but especially recently it's like this has completely lost the plot because it is not even like empiring well. It's like you're trying to be an empire and you're losing at it. So it's like double whammy. You're hurting people, you're killing people, you're causing so much hatred in the world, and it's not doing that. So foreign policy was something I talked about a lot in these debates because a lot of people weren't quite like I don't know, like literate on it or didn't really have a perspective. It was just like, oh, this is the thing. Let's talk about domestic policy. But then, if you go into swinging saying it's like this dude supports, bombing people in Iraq, where it's like, yeah, the U.S., inadvertently through that conflict killed over 300,000 people, civilians, throughout that conflict and completely destabilized the region. It's a pretty, potent thing to be talking about, and can be kind of a wake-up call for people who aren't used to hearing that sort of perspective of like, this is what's really going on here. Mm-hmm. Eventually though, I was kind of putting it all into my campaigning, and people started dropping out like left, right, center. I was, behind the scenes talking to people being like, hey, come into me. Cause there's one person who, really nobody wanted to win because they were running. Most of the Democrats were quite progressive who were running. There was one centrist candidate, which for those who are familiar with the Omaha primary, mayoral primary, flashbacks to that. And they were running and they really had that whole lane of the vote. They had a lot of friends, and it was like, okay, how do we do this? So one by one, I went to like each of the other candidates. And I was like, hey, drop out. You got to support me. Like, I picked up the most momentum right now. And like, this is the only way we're going to be able to like stop her from winning. Until it comes down to there's just three of us left. It's, the centrist, and then me and one other guy, and we're both like, basically the exact same on the policies. And, at this point I'm like failing calculus, because I'm spending, like, I remember I did 16 rallies in 1 week, which meant I did 16 campaign stops in 1 week, visiting like, I don't know if it was like 12 different classes, and like talking to them and just like getting to know them and just having that sort of like sit down conversation, like, hey, how, what's up with this? And even talking to a lot of, because students would either identify as like Democrat or Republican, and the teachers, they were genius in this sense. They would like basically force people almost to pick a side, like not actually, but they would like be like, oh yeah, fence sitters, like don't get this stuff. And they would do everything they could to mimic the environment of polarization. And they would use the media to create basically polarized sorts of things within the school, which was a really interesting sort of like social experiment aspect to this whole project. But I went to him and I'm like, hey, I'm going to drop out, endorse you, just because I need to stop campaigning. I have brain worms like from this, because it was so much fun, but every single thought revolved around the campaign. Like every single thing. I could not stop. I eat, slept, breathed it, like at all times. Every single time somebody put out a tweet, using Twitter was the other big thing. It was like not just posting like, oh, like cliches and platitudes on Twitter, but being like, hey, these are the facts. Here's like the dirt on this person. Here's this, like, do that. And it was pretty fun. Like people got talking about it, where it was like, you would look at former President Trump and like the way he used Twitter going into it. he completely captured the media cycle. And so all they talked about was like this. In the meantime, it was like they wouldn't ever focus on like any of his grotesque policies or other things that like he said he wanted to do. It was all about like, oh, he was mean to this person or that, which ultimately like most people don't care about. It's only people who are within the little, you know, bubble of like decorum. To most people, they look at it and they're like, this is funny, I don't care. They almost treat it like a joke, which maybe is not the right approach to do that, because I think it is serious. It's not a joke, but being able to use Twitter in kind of a similar way was very it was very interesting, because it was like, oh yeah, people are talking about this. It is about that word of mouth, that sort of connections. But so I dropped out, ended up being his vice president, but with I was like stipulations where I was like, I'm going to be like a really, really active VP, which I think has kind of translated a little bit into what it is right now, running for student government, which I guess we could actually get into now if you want to, unless you got more questions.
No, that's good. So we skip forward a little bit. You go to UNO. You're currently a sophomore. This is your second semester, sophomore year.
Yeah.
So your first year, you were in FYLC. What was that experience like?
Oh, that was a lot of fun. I mean, so I kind of immediately was like, I want to do things on campus, because I was living in the dorms and I didn't want to be like bored all the time. And that was something I was very aware that could just happen, where I was like, I just like play video games all day. And I'm like, I don't know if that's necessarily for me getting the most out of the college experience. So I saw the FYLC application, applied, and then, you know, a little bit later, it's like, oh yeah, you're in this. So I was like, yay. So we all get together. It's like this group of, 20 or so people from around campus. And then Amy, who was she was the vice president last year, and she like coordinated the whole thing and like led it. It was really fun. There's a day that we did we did a ropes course this one day, for teamwork bonding. And that was the day where it was like, okay, actually getting to know these people. Because we had to climb up onto these ropes. We were like harnessed in and stuff and had helmets, but it was like walking along like tight ropes or like jumping between these things.
Was this the one thing in Fontenelle Hills?
I think so. I think it was by it wasn't in Fontenelle Hills. It was by Ashland.
Okay.
But it very similar.
Okay.
Just a bit more like less of a treehouse, more of like an obstacle course.
Okay.
And just going through that, like going through an ordeal like with these people, like in the fellow cohort who like, I'm friends with just like a ton of them now. That was when I was like, okay, I'm actually getting to know you. Yeah, we did like icebreakers and other things, but like being in that sort of hardship situation where it is like we're all dealing with a very intense fear of heights right now, or like the possibility it's like, yeah, we can't actually fall, but like what if the rope breaks, and like just taking that leap of faith out onto, a platform, which is like basically just being hung on by a rope and it's swinging all around. And the nature of the course forced us to use each other as supports and as balance, to like hold each other's hands, to like support or weight on one another to keep things stable. And like that was just fantastic. So just getting through that, I was horrifically late to work that day because I thought I had work at like, I don't know, I had work at I think 3 or something. I think the ropes course started at like 12, and I was like, okay, I think we'll be able to get through this pretty quick. Absolutely not. I was like over 2 hours late to work, and it was kind of embarrassing, but it was pretty fun. But then through that, yeah.
Cool. So yeah, I just want to touch on that because I knew you were in it. Ashani, you were in it with Ashani.
Yeah, we were both in it together.
There were a bunch of other people that are currently in student government that were in it, which is cool. You eventually became the Director of Integrity. we won't talk about that because we don't have time.
Oh, cool. Yeah, no,
But
it's boring
yeah.
anyways.
Yeah, you did that. Okay, so starting with the campaign, we won't really talk about like how you guys got into it or anything, but we'll get straight into like some of the stuff you guys are trying to do.
Yeah,
So
the
I
meat
saw
and
that,
potatoes.
yeah, so I saw that you have like three different goals that you want to hit, and then like there's the main plans or like the main goals for the ticket.
Hmm.
So, I mean, any of those that you want to talk about, um,
Yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
uh, just getting it started. Sustainability is something that's really important to me. Um, I think that it's a problem that, uh, you know, both the climate crisis and just our general way of life, as a society has been kind of concerning, because you look out and see over the last, like, just taking the long view, over the last 200 years, there's been so much, which is, as far as human history goes, is an incredibly short period of time.
Hmm.
You see with the rise of industrialization and all of that, a rapid and insatiable consumption of resources and uh, destruction and degradation of environments, mass extinction of species, and all these other associated problems, which shows that we've been living in a way which is out of balance, at least temporarily. And I don't think it's something that is going to like automatically shift back into balance. I think it's something that, just like it was hard work and stuff, you know, um, industrializing and doing all that, I think it's going to be the same amount of hard work we have to put into it and put effort into being like, okay, how do we both keep standard of living high and also like make sure that there's enough for like 5 generations down the line. Um, I think that's really important, and I think that it's something that actually starts at a very local level. It starts at um, almost an individual level in a sense. There are other big things like, but I think as a school, I think these sort of small bodies, schools, cities, and like states to a degree are the most important entities, at least in the US, for setting kind of the culture around, you know, the culture and the norms around like how we dispose our waste, how people get around, all these things which maybe we take for granted as just like a fact of life, but really have elements of policy decisions in them where by taking us one course over the other, we actually are making a choice and enabling people to live in a way which is more at balance with the earth, making it easier, which I think that's really the most important thing in the job of a lot of like legislatures. So a big thing for me is I want to see UNO have Heartland B-cycle passes, annual passes for all students, faculty and staff too, but all student faculty, just including faculty and staff, and that just makes it easier from a logistic standpoint, which I guess we can kind of get into a bit later. But because Omaha is a city that I think has as weird as car centric as we are, I think it actually has really good biking potential because we're not very hilly, and like, so there aren't these steep hills you have to like get around and go over. Everything's pretty gentle. There's, you know, things that aren't that far away. And then there's this nonprofit which has set up basically stations all around the city, like a network of them, that just talking to people, and I've a friend who is like a repair person there, and they'll tell me it's like, oh yeah, they're like, because they have like a map where they can like track all of that. They're like, oh yeah, like this apartment, there's like, you know, half dozen people or whatever who only use B-cycle to get around. They don't have a car, or, you know, they just like use that, and it's like, that's really cool, like having that as a possibility. And so I want to do our part to be able to do that. Something that was really disappointing was a couple of years ago when Chancellor Gold was still in charge of UNO and UNMC. There was an agreement in the works and in the talks with Heartland Bike Share. It was going to be, UNO would pay, I believe it was $50,000 a year to them, and all students, faculty, and staff were going to have access to Heartland Bike Share, just annual pass, and just be able to check it out whenever, and be able to really fully utilize that resource on campus. Then Chancellor Gold left though, and Chancellor Lee came in, squashed that deal as it was in the making, and decided that it wasn't a good use of funds, and then things were just on ice. The deal that was in place that they were working on ended up going to UNMC, because they actually actively pursued it, and their administration thought it was something worth spending money on, and UNOs just didn't, and there was contributed to a frosty atmosphere around sustainability, because there was that, and then the Office of Sustainability got moved into probably one of the as far as organizational structure goes, there was a restructuring when Chancellor Lee came, got put under one of the least student friendly offices. It got put under facilities, so it was up on the 4th floor of Kaiser, which if you've ever been there, it's very difficult to get in there because the doors are locked and you need to call them for them to let you in. And it's this whole thing. The person wasn't giving any resources. It was just a complete, dead thing. The sustainability student club fell apart around that as just this entire thing unraveled. And as a result, last had sustainability, and then the sustainability coordinator got fired, and it was a temporary position, and they're not looking to rehire it. So as far as competitive advantage goes compared to other colleges, even in the region, University of Iowa, they are ranked, I believe, either the first or second best school for sustainability in the country. University of Michigan also has a great program. These are regional people where when you have an issue that young people care so much about, it's probably something that from even a financial or recruiting perspective, getting students to come here, you want to put resources into, because it's a hot field. And so I kind of see my job as being an advocate for that take and that perspective, because administration will listen. They will listen to students more than they will faculty or other things, because we are the ones who are paying to be here. And this is kind of a bit of a vote with your dollars moment.
Cool. So I think we already mentioned it, but just to reiterate it, you're running for the VP slot.
Mm-hmm.
Hakim is running for the presidential slot, and then Allie is running for the chief of staff slot.
Yeah.
So I had Ashani do this, and it was cool, but we also should have done this a little bit before. Can you describe what the role of the VP is, for the people that are what does a VP even do?
So the vice president chairs the Senate. They sit in front of the Senate with a little gavel hammer. They kind of direct business. They make the agenda. They send out the minutes and the schedule. They don't make the minutes, but they send it out. And they're that point of communication between senators and the rest of the executives. I really like that possibility and that envisioning of working with the Senate to be able to actually fully maximize the potential of this body of students that all want to work to try to make UNO better and represent their people and their colleges. And I think there's a lot of potential in that right now has been underutilized. So I see the vice president as kind of this is dorky. If you've seen Power Rangers,
Yeah.
do you know the person who Zordon or whatever, the dude who appears on the screen is hey, here are these things. I see them as kind of that point of communication to enable senators to be able to do a lot of hard work. A problem we noticed this last year in Senate was that, which has literally been resolved right now tonight, which this is going to date this episode, but there's 7 or 8 resolutions being heard. So this has definitely been a changing sort of thing where now there is a lot of energy behind senators doing things, which I love to see. But something first semester I noticed was that there was only I don't know, like 8 or 9 resolutions heard throughout all of the meetings. And a lot of the meetings, it was a death by meeting moment where it was like almost questioning, it's like, why are we even here? Why are we even meeting right now? If like we're going to go through appoint like one person to, yeah, traffic appeals commission, that is important, but we're going to spend like basically 2 hours doing it. And then like giving reports on things that aren't really happening. And it was a lot of like, going through the motions. So I want to kind of infuse some energy into the Senate and to direct them and connect them with opportunities where it is like, hey, here's this project, maybe we could work on it. Like I know that like, this is just an example. I know that there's charging stations all around campus that none of the plugins with them, or at least in a lot of them, are up to date. They're like old iPad ones, which are like wide. There's like the micro USB, like the old USB one, and like the things are just like out of date. And so like maybe using senators in more creative ways where it is a meeting and it's like, okay, we're going to divide into strike teams, go to each building, find how many of them there are. Because I don't know if we have a master list of how many charging stations there are across campus. So if we were to do a resolution like, hey, we're going to spend, X amount of money to update all the cords on there. So they have actually like USB-C and like lightning and things like that. I don't know if we would be able to like do that and calculate that cost without there being an undue logistical burden. So taking the time in the Senate or like during committee meeting, be like, trying to facilitate that and organize that sort of thing where it is, here's like a mission that if you, need something to work on, you could go out and do. And kind of using, I guess there's like the idea of circuits where it's like, it's a changing sort of group of, senators who work on like revolving projects, kind of taking that and maybe being a little bit more like, I don't know if like literal, just active with it, I think would be kind of cool.
Cool. So are there any, so looking at time, we got about 15 more minutes.
Oh boy.
But, but I want you to have enough time to be able to talk about some of these different things. Are there any other like goals or like main plans that you guys plan on doing that you're really passionate about?
I'm excited for the Presence app. I think that's something that I'm a little bit surprised that we hadn't gone for. I'd heard rumors about it over the last like year, in 2 years since they switched over to Presence and started using that like as the primary hub of communication and like organizing. And I'm a bit surprised that they hadn't gone for the app yet, because the Presence, like I always do this thing at like campaign events where I'm like, what is the thing we all say about Presence? And then everyone in the room says it sucks. Like it's like call and response. It's kind of crazy, to be honest, a little bit. And I'm like, how does this perception that Presence sucks get so big when we actually pay a decent amount of money for it? And like it should work. I mean, it does work actually pretty decent for seeing like events and stuff, but you have to kind of know what you're looking for. I don't think very many people, or I think it would be hard to go on Presence right now and just like be like, I'm going to go find something to do right now. Like I'm bored. I'm going to go do this. It is very much like I need to know somebody or somebody has to invite me. It's not just from the website. That can be a little bit of a barrier, which I think having a utilized UNO app would in many ways fix. I've seen that a lot of like community colleges and other places smaller than us have actually gotten it. Modern Campus, which is the parent company of Presence, they actually own they own Presence. They will commission apps specifically for like schools where you are able to actually log into your school account on it and like RSVP for an event. You could like tap on it where it's like, okay, I'm going to this, and then it will send like a calendar invite to you. Or if you use your calendar on your phone, it'll like show up on there, and you could like get a notification about it. I think that that's really, really cool because you're actually getting it onto the same platform. Similarly with like, which I would want to see just because I kind of like like pushing boundaries, just seeing like how far that can go. I want to see it's like what else can we get onto that app? And this is the way this is out in La La Land a little bit. No discussion or thoughts about this, but like what if you're also able to schedule appointments like through like MavTrack or something on there as well, where then it is like getting synced with your calendar, and there is that sort of you are on that platform. Like we use Microsoft like as a university, and that works decently well as like a all-in-one platform. But there's still enough things where it is like people are using like Google Forms to like RSVP for an event or to like take polls and other things. Where I'm like, if there's an app like Presence has a poll feature, just it's not utilized all that often because it's a little bit like esoteric. And so just getting it so students are able to use the resources we're already paying for, just making that little bit of investment further, I think something that's really gonna up the student experience.
So when it comes to, I guess, stamina or endurance for like a role like this, where you'd be doing a lot of different stuff, you'd be managing a lot, and I mean, it's just a heavy leadership burden, along with being a full-time student and like still passing your classes, hopefully. How would you plan to like stay consistently strong? Like, say that you got elected, and like right now things are still winding down, like they're starting to wind down, but things can still be done. So like, how do you maintain that stamina and also inspire for your role, like the senators that you'd be like leading, I guess, to stay, I guess, motivated throughout like the whole year?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really great question. Like for me, I try to do work and I try to do things that like feed me, like that. I'm doing this for its own sake. I'm doing this because I enjoy it. That's how it is with a lot of sustainability work. I had like 3 other meetings today, all about like just meeting with different decision makers and organizers on campus about like how do we get more trees, how do we do this, and how do we like get this into the curriculum where students are learning about the trees and are able to help take care of it, like making the university a living laboratory. So like working on things that are I'm passionate about, that feed me, and kind of tending to prioritize that. That's something I do in my own life. I have the view just of myself and the aim in my life. I want everything to be unified. I want to be the same person all the time. I don't want to be like fake. I don't want to be like, okay, now I'm like, now I'm working here and I'm going to behave differently because I'm around these people. Because I think that's what's like puts stress on you. That's what puts like, I think one of the fundamental like roots of a lot of suffering is pretending to be somebody you're not because you feel compelled to do that because you're like in the space or because of like social pressures or other things, because you're afraid that what people are going to think about you. And so I try to really stay unified and ask myself, so it's like where part of me goes, I want the rest of me to go with it. So I'm not feeling like stretched out over a million miles of like, I have all this, millions of things to do. I have all these hats to wear. So for me, that's really important. Contemplative practice has become a very important part of that. Practicing mindfulness meditation, just taking the time in my day to slow down, check in on myself, and just be like, like even appreciating like the color of that, like trying to instill that sense of gratitude where I'm like, hey, like this is all right now, like but then like as a Senate, I think pacing is going to be important. I think storytelling is also going to be important, where it is people like know what we're doing right now, like senators and also like people outside the Senate. So there is that kind of like bigger community buy-in. So it's not just the senators doing these things like from a mental tax perspective. They're not the only ones thinking about it. They're like the weight's not all on their shoulders. They also have their constituents because our social media is telling people what's going on. It's asking for feedback. So like we can get easier levels of like direct student input. So there's not necessarily a situation. Back during the B cycle resolution, there's a big debate and question over, are people actually going to use this? Is this something that people actually want? And a big debate was, oh, should we do a survey or not?
Yeah.
And then from my perspective, it was, we have enough students right now who have came into open forum, and we managed to try, that have like came in here, given up their Thursday night, or who have decided to like send emails who are all screaming that, yes, we want this. This is a good idea. I would like to have it be where that sort of like immediate student input onto a resolution or bill is something that's much more accessible to people, where it is like utilizing features on Instagram, like the story, where it is like, oh yeah, like, what do you think about like this issue? And like prompting those sorts of questions in kind of a fun, more easy to answer way, where a student who's going on their day could like give that answer and do that. So then it is also utilizing the student body to make our job as like student government easier. And I think that that would help it kind of institutionalize in some sense like student government, and give us more like legitimize us. I guess that's the better word. Because like I know that there are other universities with much more competitive student government races where a higher percentage of students vote, where it is taking it takes itself more seriously, in a sense where it is like, okay, we're going to do this, and like we're going to do it because that's like what we can do, and we understand what we're able to do, and like everyone feels knowledgeable and informed, and there's a culture of that. And I want to work towards that culture. I want to build it. I want it to be something that lasts beyond like, something that lasts beyond me, something that can stand, where it is like, oh yeah, this is just something like how we do things, and this is the way that we ensure that we're getting buy-in from the student body.
Cool. So as we wrap this up, do you have any final things that you want to put out there? Because I mean, I'm going to talk with the two other people on your ticket, hopefully, and they'll have things to say. But is there like anything else that you want to put out there for people to know? Well, first thing, voting is April 17th through the 19th, which is like 2 weeks from now. But when this gets out, it'll probably be next week. So, yeah, April 17th to 19th. That's when you vote. And I'm sure an email will come out to like all the student body. But
yeah,
is there anything that you want to like put out there?
Yeah, so if you listen to Hakim's episode also, I probably stepped on his toes when talking about the Presence app. I'm sorry about that. That's something he's really been big on. I guess the project that I'm actively working on right now is the Labyrinth, which we didn't talk about at all. I actually meant to talk about it, but I just started talking about Presence and like one thing led to the other. Labyrinth is basically a spiral pattern on the ground in some sort of sense. You can walk it. It's like a meditation or a prayer or whatever you want it to be, or it's a silly pattern that you can walk, do it fast, do it slow, do however. A lot of colleges have them. A lot of churches have them. I think UNO could have one. The UNO uses the 8 dimensions of wellness, which that's kind of been a grounding thing within our campaign, is utilizing the 8 dimensions of wellness as well to create a truly healthy campus. I think that's kind of our core value, I'd say, of our campaign is wellness. How can we make a campus that's healthy, not just in the sense of like, oh, bodily healthy, but in also, material health, economic health, social health, mental health, physical health, and spiritual health as well. And I think it's something that, could definitely, as far as spiritual health is concerned, could go a lot further in, giving opportunities to have that, particularly for a lot of Scott residents, because I lived on Scott last year. It's like a business park. You're walking around. It doesn't look like a college campus exactly. And I think that can be kind of draining, like on the soul almost at times, where it's like you're walking around, there's not really green space, there's not trees, like there's just like this grass and like these buildings, and like I don't know, my room had like ants like coming out of a crack in the wall, and like I didn't even have food in my room, but they would just like come in, and like I mean that was kind of cool. I mean it was a problem. And then it took the exterminator a month to show up, And by that time, I'd already filled the hole with like salt because I'm like, how do I stop them from coming? Because like, we don't need these things to get into the kitchen. And trust me, the kitchen had anyways. So I think there's a lot of green space where there's opportunities to implement amenities that can really increase increase the quality of the student experience, make people feel more well, be like, oh yeah, I can like go out and do this. Cause yeah, there's grass, which is great for playing Frisbee or like, I don't know, playing like cornhole, but, having that sort of opportunity. There is a, meditation space / chapel in Milo Vale, which I think not a lot of students really know about. It's a very nice space. So
Where is it at?
So it's up on the second floor. If you go down the long hallway on the second floor past the ballroom, it's the last door on the left. Check it out. It's real pretty. If you manage to make it this far, I applaud you. Go check it out. Maybe there'll be a surprise there. Who knows?
The hidden dark room.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. There's a lot of different stuff that we most definitely could have dove deeper into, but we're a bit time restricted. I'll say 3 things. So the first thing you mentioned, and I'm gonna keep this quick. The first thing you mentioned, like the whole mask and like the charade when you leave versus like when you're by yourself or at home.
Mm-hmm.
I find that interesting. I was listening to a podcast. Well, I won't talk about it, but for anyone that's interested in learning a little bit more about that, I listened to a podcast called Diary of a CEO, and the host was interviewing someone called Robert Greene, and he wrote this book called The 48 Laws of Power, and a few other books as well. And he talks about that and how it's like a charade and how you should like embrace it. And so we won't go into that. But for anyone that found that little part that you were talking about interesting, they could go into that interview because Robert Greene is very good. So next thing, I'll put any of the links that you want me to put into the description. There was a debate earlier this week on Monday that you guys answered like 26 different questions. Not deeply because you guys were time restricted heavily, but it was like a quick fire type of thing. So if people want to know some more of your policies, there are a lot of different stuff that we didn't talk about today that you guys talked about there, like transportation, like town hall, like there's a bunch of different stuff. So I would recommend they go check out that link. It will be in the description. But yeah, thank you for being the second person that I interview for this cool project. I'll be talking with Allie, hopefully, and Hakim later this week. But yeah, thanks for being on the show.
This is great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh.